Hello, this is Dr. Annie Clark with the Pennsylvania Coalition of Public Charter Schools and our show, Growing Up Charter. We are so excited today to be joined by our guest, Mr. Patterson. Welcome to Growing Up Charter. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Dr. Clark. Yes, I am Chase Patterson, the CEO of the Urban Academy of Greater Pittsburgh, one of the Commonwealth's first charter schools, and proudly the city of Pittsburgh's first charter school in operation. It's good to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, of course, of course. We were just in Pittsburgh this week enjoying your beautiful city with the CEO Summit. So
Yeah.
I love Pittsburgh.
It's a great city. I'm
Great
born and
city.
raised here, yeah.
That's wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit about how did you become the CEO of your great school?
Yeah, it's an interesting journey. I have been involved with the Urban Academy for nearly 13 years. I started my career out of college at the University of Pittsburgh, working as a program manager for the Urban League of Greater Pittsburgh in 2006. And the history behind the Urban Academy is that it was founded in 1997 by the Urban League of Greater Pittsburgh. And so my work with the school began as early as my employment with the Urban League. And then I became a member of the board 13 years ago, and really just have been in love with the work of the school and its mission. And in 2014, I became the school's first business manager, helped to transition the school from being a kind of a subsidiary of the Urban League to being more independent and free-flowing. We rebranded, relocated, increased enrollment. And in 2017, I became the third CEO of the school since its founding.
What an amazing journey for yourself and for your beautiful school.
Yeah, thank you. Point of pride, without a
You're
doubt.
welcome. I had spent 22 years at Lincoln, so I always say that I grew up at the school.
Yeah, yeah.
So that is great. Can you dig a little bit deeper about sort of like the mission and vision of the school? I am familiar a little bit with the Urban League, but I really didn't know this history, so I'm fascinated.
Yeah, the mission of our school has not changed in the nearly 25 years that we've been around. It is to to provide a superior education that develops in our students' academic excellence, social and leadership skills that ultimately enables them to be constructive contributors to the community and society as a whole. And so we have not changed the expectation or the responsibility to, on a daily basis, endeavor to provide a superior education for the students that we serve. What does superior mean? It's different for everybody, but for us, it's ensuring that our learning environment and experience is always student-centered, that it's culturally grounded and powered by culture. The Urban League is a national civil rights organization. The Pittsburgh affiliate was founded over 100 years ago. And so the foundation of our schools are deeply rooted in African-American history and principles. And so we take great pride in acknowledging, recognizing, and appreciating the past, where we come from, reaching back and pulling from that to make us greater and stronger. And so while we are a school that is focused on all of the STEAM subjects to include robotics, we also are deeply rooted in African-American culture and history and require that exposure for every one of our students and in every one of our subjects.
That is so incredible. I just love that. Can you tell me and the audience a little bit about how that's affected the students? Having this rich culture, sort of, showing them where they've come from, perhaps.
Yeah, one of the things I'll say is that growing up, born and raised here in Pittsburgh, went to Pittsburgh public schools, went to the University of Pittsburgh. My family's been here for 3 generations. I did not know a lot about Black history until I was in my teens and having a conversation with my grandfather about his youngster years. And it was important to me when I learned and discovered the Urban Academy, that we lean forward in ensuring that with pride and in an unapologetic way, we center Black culture in the work that we do. The results of that are evidence-based, and you can read about it anywhere that's Googleable. But what we see here on a daily basis is when our students leave us in the 5th grade, they're going off to schools that are top producers. And not only are they able to carry with them a sense of academic excellence and pride, but they're also carrying with them a special sense of cultural pride that allows them to be themselves, unapologetically so, while at the same time understanding that no one is greater or lesser than them, and that they are in the space that they're in because they know how to compete, because they were developed in an environment where excellence was the standard and there was no compromise around that. And that is it should be a human culture principle. Unfortunately, in a lot of instances, it is not. But here at the Urban Academy, excellence is the standard and we do not compromise.
That is great. I just love that. I myself went to William Penn Senior High School here in York. And in my 11th grade year, they allowed you to choose your history class. And I chose African American Studies because I really knew nothing. And I have to tell you, the first day I was in class, you know, when they let you look through the book, see what's coming, right? I was just blown away because there were so many just so much learning and so many products that had been created by African Americans, and I had never learned that history. And in that moment, I was like, I will never take one person's word for history. I will always force myself to research and know what I know. And so I know how that impacted me in the 11th grade. How do you see children who come from a different background than African American? How do they build a different, like, you know, do they have better understanding, or what do you see maybe in our Latino students or European students?
You know, what's wonderful about children is that they are malleable, and in most cases they are unbiased. And so what I notice about students that do not identify as Black or as African American, who are introduced to Black American history or Black American culture, is that they see it as just a natural part of their development, their journey in the American story. It's when adults put their own biases into conversations, into instruction, and into student development that you arrive with kids who have biases. And so what we work on very intentionally here at the Urban Academy is qualifying what history is. It is a point of past. It can have pain, it can have power, it can have pride, but it's not where we are now. And it's our responsibility as learners to learn from where we've been, take from it all of the great things, leave the bad, take from the bad lessons so not to repeat them, and then go forward to become constructive contributors to the communities in which we live first, and then the global society as a whole second.
I just feel like that is so powerful, and that would be a valuable lesson for all children in elementary school or in any grade, but especially elementary school. I agree with you about elementary school students. Everyone is different. I know when my grandson came to Lincoln, my daughter was a little worried because he's a little quirky kind of guy. He's in high school now, so he's okay. But she was a little worried because he's a little quirky. And I said, no, all the children are different. And so they don't really recognize differences because they just feel like everyone's different to some degree. So I love that. And I love the passion that you speak with and what you're giving children is so beneficial. It's going to
Thank you.
help them just throughout their life be great, right?
That's right. That's right.
So where do you see your school going in the next 5 or 10 years? And like how many students do you have, and do you have a hope of expansion?
Yes, so we've got 340 students, presently grades K through 5. We have submitted in November an application to the Pittsburgh Public School District to expand and amend our charter to include grades 6 through 12. And so we are hopeful that the Pittsburgh Public School District will approve the amendment to our charter, and that we will open in the 23-24 school year in September, the fall, with grades 6 and 7, and add a grade additionally every year following. Our ultimate vision, and I got to tell you this, Dr. Clark, I was just doing some research around charter schools, the history of public schools, particularly in Pittsburgh. And a couple of years ago, I came across an annual report that was produced in the mid-1960s by the Pittsburgh Public Schools. And the report, which I'm happy to share with you, was entitled "The Quest for Desegregation." It was an annual report that, on behalf of the school board, investigated issues of segregation within the public schools. And it started with a history of the Pittsburgh Public Schools and how it was founded, and that when it was established in 1883, when the Pittsburgh Public School District was established in 1883, there were 12 schools. Of those 12 schools, 5 were for white boys, 5 were for white girls, 1 was for infants, and 1 was for Black boys and Black girls. So you just do the math and you look at how the school district was established. Systemic racism was built into the design of the district. Disenfranchisement was there at the foundation. And so what this report goes on to talk about is this idea that, and I got to tell you, when you look at the data from 1965 and you look at the data in 2023 in terms of what is called the achievement gap, it's unfortunately almost identical. And it is directly connected to access to opportunity. Okay? So what I've done to change my language is I don't talk about the achievement gap anymore, because the achievement gap suggests that it's the student's problem, that it's the student's deficiency. The opportunity gap says, society, you did this. Society, you have to take responsibility for where these children are. And so what this report says in 1965 is that, and I quote, even at the detriment of those in power, we must provide the necessary resources to our most disadvantaged students and those in need. And at that time, it was poor Black kids. That was in 1965-ish. What it also said is that one of the answers to solving this problem, one of the solutions was to develop, and I'm going somewhere with this, was to develop what they called then education parks. And an education park championed this idea that in order to revitalize a community, you put at the center of that community a quality school. And if you put a quality school at the center of that community, what will happen around it is investment will happen. The boats, all tides will rise. So what I've done is I've looked at that 65 report, and I've tried to determine whether there's any evidence of whether it has worked in Pittsburgh. Well, guess what? They didn't implement anything from the report. I said, well, let's try it. So that's what we're going to do at the Urban Academy. We are situated in a community in the city of Pittsburgh, the Larmer community, that has been severely divested, it's just been abandoned, frankly, by every power to be. And we're here. There are close to, I think it's 1,200 residents in this neighborhood. It's less than a half a mile in radius. There are about 640 actual structures, homes, households. But then there are about almost 900 city-owned, vacant, abandoned properties or land. And so the Urban Academy is working to strategically acquire available land in order to build a campus that includes libraries, community space, meeting space, healthcare, wellness, workforce development, all of those things that you get in communities like Fox Chapel or North Allegheny, where if you don't want to leave your Cranberry, you don't have to leave, right? You have a good school, you have good restaurants, you have grocery stores, you have a movie theater if you want to go to it. You've got recreation spaces for your kids. But when you talk about the hood in a city like Pittsburgh, those things are few and far between. And so I'm of the opinion, as the leader of the Urban Academy, which I see as more than a school, it's a community institution, which is why I love the idea of charter schools. Now, let me be clear, I'm a skeptic of all schools. I'm just skeptical. I had a background in government and politics, so I know how folks operate. But what we've done here at the Urban Academy is we've centered this idea that we can provide a superior education to children who have historically been disenfranchised and marginalized. And two, that we can be an example for other schools like ours in other communities like ours, that a community can be refreshed, revitalized, rehabbed with a quality school at the center of it, that is not afraid to champion things beyond what happens in the classroom. And so I've rambled and ranted to answer your question, but I hope that the context both informs the work of the Urban Academy as we go forward and suggests to my colleagues that are leading other schools that look like ours that there is more for us to do. It can't just be in the classrooms. We have to get out of the classrooms and save our communities however we need to.
No, I think that it proves that you're a real visionary, and really our charter school leaders need to look beyond the building. One of the things when you were speaking about that, I was thinking about the movie Waiting for Superman. And the premise of the movie is that, people always say, oh, if you change the community, you'll change the school. And no, in fact, you change the school, you will change the community. And I think there's a direct correlation between education and economic outcomes for everyone. And when you're saying that the school is more than a school, it is the hub, I agree 1,000%. And I think that when you see school leaders who think in that context, not only do you see a transformational school, but you do see a neighborhood, a community that's transformed to the next level. But it only does come from our schools for sure. When you've had this wide range of experience, and you're this dynamic leader, can you talk to other leaders about maybe the difficulties of it, or the mentors you have, or whatever you want to say to other leaders?
Yeah. So let me start with my mentors. Having grown up in Pittsburgh, attended Pittsburgh Public Schools, I had the awesome opportunity of getting to high school, and my first principal, Bob Nichols, was a high school football teammate of my grandfather, who also went to Shinley High School. And so I can remember early experiences where Principal Nichols he would call me down to his office and we would talk. And he would ask about my leadership, what my goals and plans were. And he really invested in me. And it was certainly based on the privilege of him having grown up with my grandfather and knowing my grandparents. But I also always felt like he was truly committed to seeing me be productive with my life. So having Principal Nichols, who I would go on to join the same fraternity as, and so I call him Brother Nichols, was an honor. Similarly, one of the first Black male principals in the Pittsburgh Public School District, by the name of Bill Fisher, who led Alderdice High School for almost a decade and a half, I think, is another fraternity brother of mine who saw me kind of evolve into this role at the school, and is still in his 90s, very available to guide and to counsel me. And then lastly, my second principal in high school, also at Shenley, was Howard Bullard. And his children went to Shenley with my sister and I. We developed a relationship so much so that I can remember a moment during my high school years when he called me down to his office from my classroom, and I didn't know what was going on. And I get to his office and I'm like, "What's up?" And he says, I just haven't seen you in a couple of days. I wanted to catch up." And that moment, which I now do with some of my students, was a moment where I was like, all right, this guy, the guy before him, and a lot of these other people are really committed to me being successful. And so not only do I have great parents and great grandparents, but I also don't want to let these guys down. And so mentorship became very, very important to me. And the last mentor that I have is Bob Burley, who to this day is a mentor, along with Howard Bullard, who worked to help guide me and advise me along the way. Now, the second part of your question was around how I would encourage my colleagues in the space. And what I would say is that there are two things that I have realized over the past year or so. One, there is no such thing as a safe place. Safe places do not exist. There are places, however, where you can create an experience where folks feel safer, where they feel protected. So every day I recognize, because in order to create a safe place, you have to be in total control of the environment. In the work that we do, we are not in total control. What we can control, however, is that our people that work with us, the students and the families that we serve, feel like when they are unsafe, whatever that looks like, that they have a place to be protected and guarded. That's number one. The work that we do is to guard the people that we serve and we work alongside of. Two is to have a relationship with ease. When I first started in this role, I wore myself out, trying not to make any mistakes, hoping that every decision I made was the right one, knowing that it wouldn't be. There was so much I did that created weight and heaviness and burden on myself that then translated to the people that I was working with and serving, that it ultimately became fragile. I became fragile, my team became fragile, and I've just evolved in this idea that I'm here to do good work. I'm going to do that. I make mistakes because I'm human. But if I have a relationship with ease, then I can accept that those mistakes are just part of the normal discourse of a day or the normal way that I live. That allows me then to be free to make mistakes, to fail forward fast, and to do things that are uncommon in the educational space, like build a community around a school. And so that's the advice I would give, obviously anchored in a commitment to making those who support you, who love you, who care for you, who got you where you are, proud of you. thereby being proud of themselves.
Yes, that was amazing. I love that. I love that you talked about being able to sort of free yourself to fall forward, right? And to be brave and courageous because it is hard work. And sometimes we do want too much for perfection when we're all growing and learning, and that's the process of it. Do you have the opportunity to call students down to your office and to have similar conversations with them that your mentors had with you? And how do you see it now from being on the other side? How's that affecting your students?
Yeah, great question. One, I often joke that I co-parent 334 kids, because in the work that I do, I find it a requirement to be at my best so that when my students see me, they can see themselves in me. My son attends this school, and I'm very proud of that. And he is no different than any other student I serve. And the students know that. Yes, I call kids in my office all the time. As a matter of fact, before we jumped on the call, I saw a student who was meandering through the hall, and I asked him, "What's the most valuable thing you have?" And he knew the response because I stress it all the time, and that's time. So if you're slow poking through the hallway, then you're wasting what? I'm wasting time. Okay. So if time is the most valuable thing you have, why are you wasting it? That one moment, and there was a guest in the hall, they're like, damn, I should have recorded that. I said, well, you can come back tomorrow. I'm gonna say it probably 5 or 6 more times. That's my thing. But the reality is that while I have structured mentor-mentee relationships through our school's mentoring program, I find myself being a pseudo mentor all day, every day, both to the students that I serve, as well as to the Black men that work on the staff here.
I love that you transitioned right to your staff and to that sort of dynamic. Can you talk a little bit? Do you use distributed leadership in your organization?
Yes, I do. You
Could you
know,
talk a little bit about that? How do you distribute leadership across with your staff, and just how does that look in your building?
yeah. So one, um, I am of the opinion, our school organization is of the opinion that we are all leaders. That those of us that are in the classroom all day, every day are leading students. Those of us that are intervention specialists are leading small groups. Those of us that are on the instructional leadership team are leading colleagues. Those of us on the administrative team are leading the school organization. And those of us that are in executive senior leadership, we're leading everybody, including the community. And so as it relates to how leadership is distributed, one, I own every decision that's made, whether it's a decision I had anything to do with or not, whether it's the right decision or the wrong decision, I own it, I accept it, because ultimately my philosophy is hire hard, manage easy. If you got hired, you went through a tough process. I should be able to manage you easy, and therefore the words that come out of your mouth are just as like the words that are coming out of my mouth. And that's part of the onboarding process. Is you're here because I trust you to love our children the way I love our children. And sometimes that can be tough love too. As it relates to the uh, the literal distribution of leadership and how that is shared, it is, for lack of a better term, businessy. You know, I report directly to the board. I have two direct reports. That's our chief academic officer, who manages the instructional landscape, our chief operating officer, who manages finances and operations within the building. They've got their respective teams. And what I like my leadership team to know is that they're really paid to make tough decisions and to be prepared for 3 years from now. If they're working on a problem in real time, they're not doing their job. A real-time problem is somebody else's work. A future problem is their work. So those of us that are in senior leadership, our work, while we get involved in the daily operations of things, our work is really supposed to be focused on how do we provide a top caliber, superior learning experience for our kindergartners in 5 years, for our fifth graders in 6 years. Like, how do we continue to grow and develop and get better? How are we 3 years ahead of the game? That's our job.
When you talk about your fifth grade students, and now you've asked for this expansion, why did you see there was such a need for you to go beyond the fifth grade of what you're offering students?
Yeah, great question. So this demand has existed almost since we were founded 25 years ago. When I became the CEO in 2017, it was almost one of the first decisions I made. It's time to get bigger. But what I had to dial back on and realize is that we needed to really ensure that our elementary program was strong and stable, because we all know the data about how students arrive in kindergarten, particularly the students that we serve. And so we needed a strong program that was closing as many of those gaps as we could. And I believe we've done that. And so as a result of cultivating a strong program in the elementary space, our parents, as I said, have been demanding it forever. It was just the right time. Also, having a positive relationship with the school board has helped. We have a really healthy relationship with the school district. And so it just made sense that now was the time for us to really start to take that next set of risks.
Thank you for bringing up the authorizers. We have actually done some work with your authorizer in Pittsburgh. And you're absolutely right. Your authorizer is way further ahead than any district authorizer in the state. We're actually working with the national network of authorizers and sort of showcasing the work in Pittsburgh because it's so forward thinking. Can you tell a little bit to school leaders of how do you help cultivate that relationship, and that you don't maybe just leave it on the authorizer, but the items that you do?
Yeah. So one, for me, what's been very beneficial is that I'm a product of the district, right? So my high school, Shinley High School, at the top of the building before you entered, the words were "enter to learn, go forth to serve." So I'm only doing what they asked me to do every day for 4 years, right? I'm only taking what I learned in this amazing school, in this amazing school district, and putting it into practice through service. And so having that, one, as a feather in my cap, and then two, understanding the importance of not getting mixed up in the fray, right? I told you earlier that I'm a skeptic of all schools and all school systems and all systems in general. And so as a result, I let you show me who you are, and I take you at face value. I don't take the one or two board members who are retired educators and leaders of the Federation of Teachers as the standard bearer of the district. I've never had an incident where the superintendent talked negatively about the Urban Academy or any other charter school for that matter. So I see the superintendent as a partner, and I see the school board members as politicians. That's just that. Those are facts, right? I also believe that because charter schools are public schools, because the Urban Academy was chartered by the Pittsburgh Public School District, I see myself as a Pittsburgh Public School. And so when I'm having conversations with the district, whether it's with members of their staff or even members of their board, most of whom are friendly, I remind them that we're all in the same business. We're serving the same communities, the same students. And if we can figure out how to work collaboratively around food service, professional development, special education services, there are so many ways that charters and traditional school districts can work collaboratively to the benefit of the children that we serve. And oftentimes I find myself having to remind folks that we are in the business of serving children, right? We're not in the business of appeasing adult agendas, okay? We're in the business of prioritizing the interests of students, their families, and their communities above all else. And when the adults and the politics get mixed in, I have no space for it. I tell the truth, I provide the data, I let it speak for itself, and I have a great legal team if I need them.
Oh, I love that. I agree. If you stay student focused, if that's really, your heart, you will be able to sleep fine at night, number one, and your work will always move forward. Your school will always move forward. And I find that's the easiest part of the work is keeping my eye on the students was the easiest part. You served a school when it came through the COVID-19 pandemic that we're still going through in many ways. What were your major concerns when your students came back? And what are your concerns for maybe the next couple years with academics or just a whole child in general?
Yeah. So I will say that I could not be more proud of my colleagues, my board, my students in particular, and their families for how we collectively as a community navigated what was the most disruptive time in the American educational system, across the globe for that matter. So I'm very proud of the work that we did. What I was most concerned about was not the academic performance, you see. I don't put too much stock in the PSSAs. We do well on them, great, but we monitor our internal data and we have a simple goal, and it's the goal that every school should have. Grow your kid a year. If every student grows a year, by the design of the work that we do, you've done a good job. Now, if you grow them more than a year, you've done a hell of a good job, and you'll be rewarded for that. But I was less concerned about how students would perform academically because I know my kids are smart. I was more concerned about the social impact that being so far removed from their peers, from social development. I was more concerned about that, how that would impact our students. And what it has demonstrated is, unfortunately, we have seen an increase in cyberbullying, inappropriate viewership, inappropriate conversations. And when I mean inappropriate, I mean not age appropriate, because in many, now let me just, I have to toot our horn here. The Urban Academy went to complete remote learning. Governor Wolf closed down on the 13th, I think, of March. We were already planning to close on that day. We were ready, up and running instruction on that next Tuesday. I think it was the 16th or 17th. So we were up and running virtual instruction Every student had a packet. Every student had a Chromebook. When I first became CEO, it was goal number one to get every student a piece of technology, one-to-one. So every student had a Chromebook. So we did not have to wait to order the technology. Every student had the packet they needed. We had surveys to understand what needs families had, if they needed tech support or connectability support. And so we checked all of those boxes. And so there was no disconnection or disconnect rather, in our teachers and our students remaining connected. And so we then came back. So we were out in March, and then I called every member of the staff, every single member of the staff, the beginning of the summer in August. And I said, listen, I want to bring us back in person, hybrid schedule, A and B, Fridays off. I need to know how you feel. I asked every member of the staff that, because I recognized that they were putting their lives on the line in a very real way. And 100%, not one person that I called said no. Now, they asked questions to ensure that we were taking the appropriate measures, but every single member of my staff said, yes, let's go back to work. So when I think about the problems that COVID presented to us, I'm less concerned about the academic pieces because we remain so consistent in that space almost from the jump. What I was concerned about, which I remain concerned about, and we see residual impacts of, are the students' connectability to technology in a way that we have never seen before. They needed it to learn. So whereas for most of us, technology was a toy, for lack of a better term, now it became a tool and a toy, right? So you have students who need it to learn, but then they also need it or use it to enjoy life, to stay in contact. And so we got kids on TikTok and Instagram, and it's out of control. But it is where we are now. And so we're working really to figure out how do we ramp up our interventions to ensure that our students are making the right decisions, that our parents know what tools are available. But my concerns were less around academics and more around social impact.
In the news, we hear a lot about grow your own programs. And some of the things that I share with legislators is that charter schools, we've been growing our own for decades because we had to. How do you diversify your staff by one, bringing people in from the community to work, and then two, how do you grow them from beyond maybe being a para to a teacher to a school leader?
Yeah. One, diversity among our staff is important. More than 60% of our staff are self-identified as African American. We have almost double the national average of Black men who are instructors and educators here. We don't recruit any differently than anybody else, but we attract differently. And I think that is, it has a lot to do with the fact that we are a historically Black school. We have always been Black led, and we are unapologetic in those two truths. And that creates, in many ways, a safer place for Black educators and those aspiring to be educators to come and to be. How do we develop our paras or our teachers' assistants, what we call here co-teachers, into lead teachers, is by not really creating any differential in terms of expectation or opportunity. Anybody that works here at some point or another is going to be leading a class. I taught a math class last week. I was glad they were using videos because I wouldn't have been able to do it without it. But at some point, everybody is going to be in front of a group of 25 kids and be responsible for leading that class. And one of the questions that we ask in our interviews, as I mentioned earlier, hire hard, manage easy, is what is it that we can help you do in your aspirations? If you just want to be a teacher for the rest of your life, great, we got you. There's always going to be a job. But if you want to start your own charter school, or if you want to be a principal or building leader or instructional leader, we want to develop a plan to help support you. And that's what we do. We've got a fantastic retention rate, a very confident and comfortable staff. And I don't think I've suggested this. This is not work that is done alone. It's very collaborative here in leadership. But we take great pride in keeping our people, and we take great pride in cultivating talent from within.
I love that. And I think that if you have the right leader in place, you will attract the employees that you want because they see those attributes in you and they're like, that's the guy I want to work with, right? And so, and everything you described occurs in distributed leadership. When you have a very mission driven school, it's because everybody buys in from the leader to the janitor and to the food service. So that's great.
That's right.
How are you going to move over the next couple years? I know you want to do this expansion, but what else are you looking at? The expansion, would that occur in your building you're currently in? Would you expand somewhere else? Whatever
Yeah,
information you can give.
sure. So we are expanding into a separate building, a former Pittsburgh public school, that is less than a mile away from our current location, still on the east side of Pittsburgh, but in a similar community. And so, there are a couple of things at the top of my to-do list. One, we are renovating a central office space that we acquired here in the community for our senior leadership team to relocate to that space in order to manage the work that we're doing on a larger scale, more removed from the day-to-day kind of functions. We are acquiring site control as much as we can here to advance our master plan, which includes the building of another school on our property, as well as housing, both for students, their families, and our staff. And then I'm working on planning our 25th year celebration, which I hope everyone will come on out to and support. And then lastly, when I became CEO in 2017, I had a conversation with Dennis Henderson, who's the former deputy CEO of Manchester Academic Charter School, and Dr. Wayne Jones, who is the CEO of Penn Hills Entrepreneurial Charter School. And we talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings that we were all doing. We're just kind of shooting the breeze. And we had this crazy idea of combining our resources and producing an experience for all of our staff that would give each member of our staff the same marching orders as it related to serving Black students. What we did 6 or 7 years ago has now grown to become the State of Black Learning Conference, which is a program of the Urban Academy. And it is a point of personal pride for Dennis, Wayne, and I, because what we sat around a bar having a conversation about as a way to save money has now turned into a national experience, which pulls presenters and educators from across the country together and focuses their energy and their time right before they get back into work on how do you center Black students, their needs, their communities, and their families in the work that you do every day? How do you prioritize their learning in a way that is going to put them into society better off than when they came into you at the start of the school year. And so the state of Black learning is growing, it's getting much larger, and we're looking forward to a continued development with the expansion of that program into a fellowship for educators and a number of other things that are happening with the state of Black learning. So I got a lot of work to do, and I'm looking forward to doing it all.
You definitely have a lot of work to do. And I love that you guys came up with that idea together. And I was doing an advocacy training with parents today. We had our second cohort. It's a passion of mine. And I said, it's your Rockstar 5. Who are you going to call tomorrow if you want to start a new project? And I'm glad that you guys have each other because you all are rock stars. So it makes sense to me that you guys would collaborate and lean on each other and create sort of like this informal network that became a formal network and is now going from changing your neighborhood to changing the world, which is the best word, right?
Right. That's right.
So I love that. The last question I have for you, and this was amazing. I hope you'll come back and talk to me again. You're so fascinating. I love hearing about your school and your work. Any last words for school leaders out there to get them from now to the end of this school year?
Take it easy. It sounds simple, and it really is that simple. Take it easy on yourself, on your staff, on your families, on your kids. Take it easy. We'll get there.
Yes, great advice. I love it. I love it. Well, this was just wonderful. I learned so much about your wonderful school, and I can't wait to come there in person and meet your wonderful students, your beautiful staff. I'm sure I'm just going to have the best experience, of course. Thank you, sir, for leading a school and everything you're doing for the community.
Thank you, Dr. Clark.
Thank you. We'll talk soon.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.